Now, there are some things you want to take into consideration when using gelatin. Now, again, your use percentage is going to range from about 0.6% on the low side to 1.7% on the high side. And again, this is just a guideline. So this is here for you to kind of just have a good idea of the range in which you're going to be using gelatin. Obviously, individual recipes that call for various strengths in the gel that's actually set are going to call for various amounts. But again, whether you use powder or gelatin sheets, whether you're using bronze, gold, silver, or platinum sheets, you're going to hit one of these ranges within this basic use percentage. Now, gelatin itself is actually an animal protein that's derived from collagen. As we talked about in previous videos, collagen is basically made up of a triple helix of gelatin. And so what happens is when time, temperature are applied to this collagen, this triple helix will unravel into individual gelatin strands. Now, all animals contain collagen in their muscles as part of the connective tissue, which gives our muscles structural integrity. But there are various parts of the animal that contain more collagen than others. And most commonly, a lot of gelatin is actually derived from pig skin. So what they'll do at the processing plant is they'll take all the skins from the butchered pigs, they'll throw them into a large vat, they'll apply moisture and heat, they'll break the collagen down that's contained in the pig skin, and pig skin, again, contains a very high amount of collagen. They break it down into gelatin, into liquid form, then they dehydrate it into either a powder or a sheet. Now, this isn't the only place that you get gelatin from, but if you're worried about kosher cooking or if your diet doesn't allow for pork, you want to make sure that the gelatin that you're buying isn't derived from pig skin or other pork products. And there are other forms of gelatin out there that are not pork based. Now, gelatin is what's called a hydrocolloid, and you'll see this term thrown about a lot in modern cooking circles. So if you're reading some chefs like Grant Achatz, or you're reading the Modernist Cuisine cookbook series, they'll talk about hydrocolloid, and all that means is basically a hydrocolloid is an ingredient that affects water structure, how water reacts. So gelatin is a hydrocolloid in the sense that it will bind water into a matrix and set it as a gel. Now, all hydrocolloids have to be hydrated, and various hydrocolloids or various ingredients that bind to water have different hydration rates and ratios and best practices. So for gelatin, to hydrate it properly, if using sheets, you first want to hydrate or soften the sheets in some cold water. I'll normally throw some ice cubes in there as well, just so the gelatin doesn't get too soft, but you have those brittle sheets. So you want to hydrate those by soaking them in cold water until they're soft. And then powder gelatin is normally hydrated directly into the liquid that will be gelling. So if you're going to be making a panna cotta and you're using a milk base, you would take the appropriate amount of gelatin powder, you would place it in the cold milk, and then you would allow it to dissolve slightly, and you call this blooming, whether you're soaking sheets or you're doing the powder itself. You drop the powder gelatin into the liquid that you are going to be gelling. You let it dissolve or bloom, and then you bring it up to temperature. Now, gelatin, both in sheet and powder form, need to be brought up to an appropriate temperature to melt and fully hydrate before they can be cooled back down and allowed to set. And this temperature is universal for both gelatins, which is about 122 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Celsius. Now, if the gelatin becomes too hot, you do run the risk of it breaking down and it's not going to set to its full potential. So when working with gelatin gels and heating them up, you don't want to raise the temperature above 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius. Again, if you go above 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius, you risk this gelatin gel slightly breaking down, and then it won't fully set on you. You might still get a gel, but it won't be as strong or as consistent, which is very important, than if you heat to below 140 to dissolve. So if you are starting with a hot liquid, you want to first allow that liquid to drop down to 140 or 60 degrees Celsius or below, in this range of 122 to 140 or 50 degrees to 60 degrees Celsius, before incorporating your gelatin. Now, for something When using sheets, you can just take the sheets that have been soaked, you squeeze out that excess liquid, and you drop it directly into the pot. When it's at the appropriate temperature, you whisk it until it dissolves, pass it through a strainer just to make sure that any undissolved bits don't end up in your gel. Versus powder, if you're starting with a hot liquid, you want to first bloom this in a small amount of cold liquid, and then incorporate that cold liquid with that powdered gelatin into your final mix. Now again, when you're working on this use percentage of 0.6% to 1.7%, the cold liquid that you dissolve your powdered gelatin into needs to be taken into account and added to your total amount of liquid so you can make sure you are multiplying by the proper use percentage and you're having a consistent result. Now, gelatin is a slow setting gel, so it needs to be at about 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius for a prolonged period of time, a matter of hours, before it fully sets up. So what this means is, to play it safe, if you're going to be making any sort of ingredient, or you're going to be making any sort of gelatin-based gel, you want to make sure you cool it rapidly and then at least give it overnight to set up in your refrigerator. So you're looking at about 6 to 10 hours, depending upon what temperature that gelatin gel was when it went into your fridge and how efficient your fridge is at cooling. But just to make sure that you don't get caught in a bind, you want to make sure that you give this at least overnight, or 12 hours. You plan for 12 hours of setting, even though the gelatin will be done setting much more before 12-hour mark. But this is just so you can play it safe.